on to explain that he should be able to live the way he wants to live. He should be able to act the way he wants to act. Because I'm my own God, I can make my own rules, and I can walk in my own paths. But then these people think they are so wise. These people think I have all wisdom. I can walk how I want to walk. Josh just talked to us about how we need to be wise. These people think that they seek wisdom. But this wisdom isn't a true wisdom. It's only wisdom that is in their own eyes and in their own thinking. In the book of Proverbs, Solomon would write, "Be not wise in your own eyes." Wisdom that only comes from your own eyes and your own understanding means nothing. I want us to notice this morning two different people who are wise in their own eyes, why we need to be neither of them to be pleasing in this life. First, be not wise in your own eyes in rejecting God. I want you to notice a couple more quotes by atheists of people who are just wanting to attack God, bring God low. One said, "Religion has actually convinced people that there's an invisible man living in the sky." God is just an invisible person, an imaginary person that people believe in. How foolish would you be to believe in the imaginary? That's what they want to paint as a picture in your head. Another said, and many have said this, all thinking men are atheists. If you want to be wise, you better be atheist. If you want to be wise, you better deny God. Question I would like to ask to these individuals who think wisdom comes from denying God is the same question that was asked to Job in Job 38. Notice in the book of Job that Job was going through his life and he was questioning, why am I going through this? I just want to see God so that I can ask for an answer. And here's what God says in Job 38, verse 4, he says this, "Where wast thou? Job, where wast thou when what? When I laid the foundations of the earth." You think you're so wise. You think you have all understanding. Where were you when God created the earth? Many take an agnostic stance. They don't even know how the earth was created, yet you're so wise, yet you're so puffed up. You're so wise in your own eyes, you think, I can deny God. Brethren, that wisdom gets us nowhere. But not only do we not need to be wise in rejecting God, we need to not be wise in our own eyes in rejecting God's plan. How many of you have heard this before? Well, to me, God is, and then they explain who they want God to be. Well, to me, God is all loving, and so because he's all loving, God would not really send anyone to hell. Well, to me, God is all loving, so he would not really require baptism. He wouldn't condemn denominations. This, to me, God is very dangerous. And we realize it in other aspects of life, but sometimes it's forgotten when it comes to the Bible. Think about this for a moment. If you did not know me, you did not know Kaleb Nelson, and then you were to go over and say, well, to me, Kaleb Nelson is, and you were to describe me. Just because you're describing me in a certain way, does that mean that that's who I actually am? No. To me, Kaleb Nelson is, well, that doesn't mean anything. In order to describe me, you would have to know who I am. God gave us a way that we can know who he is. We don't have to be guess. We don't have to be wise in our own eyes, picking out who God is. We can know from his scripture. I want you to notice what God says about those who use their own wisdom to find God. Notice with me 1 Corinthians chapter 1. 1 Corinthians chapter 1. In verse 18, Paul talks about how the preaching of the cross is to them that perish, those Greeks, foolishness. They saw it foolish that a deity should die. Preaching the cross is to them that perish, foolishness. Unto us which are saved, it is the power of God. Verse 19, he says he destroyed the wisdom of the wise because deity did come and die. Verse 20, where is the wise? Where are they now? But notice verse 21 with me. Notice what God says about those who are wise. For after that, in the wisdom of God, the world by what? By wisdom. The world by their own wisdom, by their own thoughts, by their own understanding. What did they get? They knew not God. Your own wisdom cannot find you God. You can be wise in your own eyes. It won't find you God. How did they find God? How was God found? But it pleased God through what? The foolishness of preaching, by what others would see as foolish, to save them that believe. Brethren, the Bible and preaching is the only way to find God, not our own wisdom and not our own thoughts, not our own understandings. So then what do we need to do? We need to not be wise in our own eyes. We need to not think of ourselves highly and look for God in our own thoughts and our own understanding, but instead, notice this. Let's turn to Proverbs chapter 3. Proverbs chapter 3. Notice what is said by Solomon. Verse 1, my son, forget not my law. Who is that? That's God. Forget not my law. Why do we not need to forget the law of God? Why do we need to stick to the law of God? Verse 4, so shalt thou find favor and good understanding in the sight of God and man. Brethren, if we stick to God's law, if we stick to God's plan, that's how we find good pleasure. But notice how we don't. Verse 5, trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Lean not on thine own understanding. We do not find it by leaning on our own understanding, by leaning on our own wisdom. We don't find it by trusting our own paths. We find it by trusting God's. Verse 7, be not wise in thine own eyes. Don't be wise in your own eyes. Don't choose your own path that you think is wise. Choose God's. And then notice what it says. Fear God. Depart from evil. That's how you find true wisdom. Not from your own understandings, not from your own thoughts. In fact, 1 Corinthians chapter 3, God would say that He destroyed the wisdom of the wise. When all is said and done, what you think and your own wisdom will mean nothing. What will mean everything will be God's way. Don't be wise in your own eyes. Rather, be wise in God. That's where true wisdom comes. That's where true wisdom can be found.